this family has been concentrated in probably their core area is probably less than a quarter mile square, almost year round. I mean, sometimes they'll be bumped out of that. And their home range is larger, but their core area is pretty small with this one family. And what I've seen is that there are other families that are adjacent to that, have a similar small core area. I think that's pretty common in especially southern New England, where there's a lot of folks, a lot of high human population density. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing my developing relationship with this one family over the years. Not all of the photographs are of these families. These are just kind of random photographs that I put together. Each one has a story behind it. These are individuals that I've encountered and some memorable experience that I have. But anyway, so what I'd like to do is to share a practice that I find very helpful when I'm going out, and if I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of being as minimal disturbance as possible. I want to go out and not disrupt the rhythm of things that are going on a particular day. I mean, that has to do, we'll talk about paying attention to bird language. That's a big cue. I guess, for lack of a better word, the energy of a particular day. You've got a windy day that has a certain energy to it. You have a rainy day that has a certain energy to it. You have a snowy day. You have different days that have different energies. And so a lot of it has to do with, from my experience, is matching those as best as I can. Some of it has to do, if anybody's familiar with Tai Chi, doing energy work in that manner, the way of moving is kind of very, very slow and very gentle movements as a way of passing through the woods. And as I get older, it's a lot easier for me to go slow, so that helps. And it's a lot easier for me to find places to sit down to rest. That helps. We'll talk about that. I just want to present a practice. This is it. This is nuts and bolts of the practice. That's it. That's the whole ball of wax. Is getting into a very still space. Usually our minds are going 90 miles an hour. I know I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, oh, wait a minute. How long did dinosaurs live? How far back in history did they live? Just all this kind of stuff going on. And part of what we talk about with dealing with other than human or more than human species is getting out of our anthropocentric worldview and switching over to a biocentric worldview. We talk about thinking outside the box. Well, thinking is the box. Sorry, thinking is the box. Our thinking, our vocabulary, the language that we have, the forms that our thinking takes, things that we get fixated on in our thinking is all conditioned. That's all cultural conditioning. We don't think, sorry again, but we don't have original thoughts. And so to get around that, we stop focusing on thoughts and thinking. And that's important, I think, it's important to develop a sense of stillness. And that can take, I started up a meditation practice years and years ago, mainly because I wanted to be able to sit still when I'm out in the woods. And so that's an important practice. It doesn't necessarily have to be every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting up and sitting in the lotus position and chanting Om or anything like that. It doesn't have to be that. It is important, I think, to find a still place in your mind. And a lot of times all it is just a matter of stopping. Just stop. And sense that there's no real thoughts. Thoughts might kick in later on, but initially everything slows down. And the reason I think that's important is because I believe, I have no way of proving this, but I believe that still place is the same place everybody else is at. And that's where the deer are. That's where the squirrels are. There's the baseline. We hear, I think, Tom Brown, I think, talked about baseline behavior. And I think humans a lot of times don't even know what our baseline behavior is. And I believe that our baseline behavior is that still place, and everything comes out of that. And the same way I believe is going on, transpiring with wildlife, with deer in this particular case. They're very deliberate, very still, very calm. They move, generally they move very slowly and extremely gracefully. Very conscious, very aware of every limb, where their left front foot comes down, their left foot lands right in the same place. For humans to do that, they have to be a gymnast or something along those lines that practice for years and years and years. With deer and most wildlife, that happens. That occurs naturally, coming from that still place. And I believe that if we go into the woods, I think Thoreau said something along the lines of, if we're bringing, can't remember the exact quote, but something along the lines, if we're bringing our day-to-day business to the woods, we have no business being there. Leave it all behind. Just let it go. Just let's drop it and go into the woods. It's helpful to stop when you enter the forest. Get out of your car, start going. Just stop and kind of get centered is the term. I know with Qigong and Tai Chi, we're dealing with energy. Sometimes it's helpful to just visualize, moving that energy down, become more grounded, and then start moving into the woods and being aware. Being present is extremely important. Wildlife, deer are generally present, not always. Sometimes they're off in la la land somewhere, but generally they're present and they're quite aware of their surroundings. I think we had somebody give a talk on bird language. That's very important. I've observed the deer paying very close attention to what the birds are doing. I walked into the woods one time in the winter. There were 15 deer down probably 50 yards from me. They did not acknowledge my presence when I walked into the woods. But a nuthatch did over here on this side. So the nuthatch started alarming, and the deer looked up, but they didn't look at the nuthatch. They looked right straight at me. So I feel that something was communicated by that nuthatch, and I've seen that in various circumstances where there'll be if I'm disturbing, if I'm causing a disturbance, the birds will be the first ones to let me know, and everybody else that's in the woods will be aware of it. And in some cases, if we go out in the woods and we don't see anything, it's because the birds told them, run. And so that they're like the early warning system. So this is, I got this other one. I was involved with the state of Connecticut. I was involved in ended up being five-year fawn mortality study in the northwest part of the state. So we collared 95 fawns, 125 does over that period of time, and then followed them with radio collars with the telemetry throughout the year. And the purpose of the study was to have a better understanding of what might be causing mortality for the fawns. And so this is one of them, one of the fawns. Just as an aside, you can tell individual fawns by their spots, the patterns. Each fawn has an individual pattern. And science can be complex, and it helps if you have a camera. That way you can compare the pattern. But each fawn has their own unique pattern of spots, so you can tell them apart. This one was probably about an hour old. What we had collared the does during the winter after hunting season. And we collared the does in the winter. We installed what is known as a vaginal implant transmitter, and what that allowed us to observe, when the mother had the fawn would push that transmitter out, and then it would start signaling a very specific pattern, and the pattern changed every half hour. So we could tell by listening to the sequence of beeps exactly when more or less when that fawn was born. This one was about an hour old. That's not one of the local ones. These are the local ones. This is a mother and her buck fawn that I've been hanging out with this past year. Well, the doe, there's a yearling doe that isn't part of this immediate family, and so I was with the mother and that yearling doe when the yearling doe was a fawn the previous year, and I think I probably have photographs of them further down the line. This is August, I believe. The fawn still has his spots. And I don't understand how it happens, but I feel very blessed because I go to the same place. I walk the same trail certainly for the past 20 years, if not longer. Same trail. I encounter the same deer. I sit in the same spot. I'm never bored because there's always something cooking, something happening out there. And for whatever reason, many generations back, the dominant doe that had that birthing area in that general location of my main sit spot was okay with me. That's an individual thing. I wasn't feeding. I don't feed any of these deer. I don't do anything to encourage any interaction. So it's gotten to a point now. It's kind of progressed generation after generation after generation that they'll allow me, this generation, the most recent one, they'll allow me to just walk right past them and sit down. And I think that's important. I think that's important as far as dominance is concerned. You don't want to stand up and stare at them. You want to kind of look to the side and move beyond slowly and just sit down so you're lower than they are. And it's surprising how a lot of times they'll come over to me. I don't have to approach them because I don't want to disturb them. I want to pay attention to their body language. I want to know that, okay, their butt hair is flared and they're staring at me and their ears are directly face me, then I know they're a little bit anxious. So if that's the case, then I'll back off, maybe take a different route. But if they're okay, if they're feeding, main thing, if they ignore you, well, you're in. If they totally ignore you, it's like you're just part of the landscape. No big deal. Once they start staring back at you, then there's an issue on their part. And if they're feeding, they're relaxed in your presence because that's a more vulnerable position. Their head's down. They're chewing on, this time of year, they're chewing on acorns, so that's making a lot of noise. It's like the beer in the previous presentation. They're munching away and they can't hear anything coming up. So if they're aware that you're there, but they go back to feeding, then they're fine because that's a vulnerable position. The next tier is if they lay down in your presence or you walk into their area and they stay laying down. That's absolutely the most vulnerable position because they're down, they have to get up and run. There's a lag in reaction time. Of course, those that are spooked resting deer know that reaction time is pretty short. Their legs, the way their legs fold, their front legs fold back like that, and the hind legs fold forward. And when they are startled, it's like all four legs, like a spring, just force their body up and gone, all like one motion, up and gone. So it's pretty amazing. I couldn't do that if my life depended on it. So that's where I am right now, is with this one population, or one family, I should say. This is that same fawn. And again, this is later on in August. You see on his belly, the spots are starting to fade a little bit. By September, right now he doesn't have any spots on him. So by September they start fading quite a bit, mostly on the side. They're growing into winter hair, but also the white on the spots. They're longer hairs. They're little tufts that extend beyond the surface of the regular hairs, and they're very brittle. So they wear off fairly quickly. The white run. And that's when they're most vulnerable to predation. Bears will eat fawns during those first couple of weeks. Coyotes will, bobcats will. But once a fawn gets to be about a month old, they can run, pretty much outrun any predator at that point. So once they are able to do that, and even before that, it's interesting how curious they are, especially male fawns. A lot of times I sit in the woods and they'll come walking over to me, stare at me, and turn around and run back to mom. And then I turn around, walk back over, do the same thing a couple times. It's just like a little human child might experience. And that's the same fawn about a month or two later. Again, most of these shots, and I'm kind of dumbfounded as to why this occurs, but she's only about 7 or 8 yards from where I'm sitting. So I'm not going to complain. This is this year's little buck fawn. This, I believe, was in July. But there's a lot of talk about rewilding. That's a hot topic now. Rewilding, actual rewilding of perhaps extirpated species. I have relatives that are in Argentina that are involved in that, rewilding Argentina. So you hear a lot about that. There's also rewilding the soul. I'm talking about humans, rewilding, spiritual rewilding. It's not something you do in a weekend workshop. We are so phenomenally conditioned by our culture that we're not going to lose that. That's something we're still going to be aware of. But the main thing is being aware of the fact that we are profoundly conditioned by our culture. And I think one of the antidotes is to spend as much time out in the forest, where you're looking at a biocentric focus instead of an anthropocentric focus. That we're just part of the mix. We're nothing special. We're just part of the mix. And I think sometimes we regret that here we are in traditional Nipmuc land here, and it's like, oh gosh, I wish those elders were still here, and I could obtain teachings from them how to be a human being. And I think, well, okay, who were their teachers? And I go back to, in my case, the most profound teacher are the deer, and the other wildlife too, but my focus is with the deer. They're the teachers. They teach me how to be, what's real, what's really essential, what is life about. They don't get into all the philosophy. They just live it. But that's a wonderful way of kind of simulating that. Spend time out in the woods. Spend time because your brain functions so totally different when you're out with you go. New England's great for all these broken branches and everything going this way and that way, and nothing's like here, where we have square things, flat floors, flat ceilings, artificial lights. Everything is very different, and our brain waves shift when we're in nature. And if we can sit where there can be a bird, it can be a squirrel, it can be anybody. Anybody can be a teacher to teach us the original teachings, because that's where the native peoples here in this country, New England, southern New England, I know there's been evidence of people living here for 10, 12,000 years. That's after the Ice Age. There were probably people here before then, but the evidence is probably gone or underwater. But when they first came into this world, this Western hemisphere, they had to learn from who was already here. It was a caribou or further south and moose and the deer. We had caribou in Connecticut back then, 10,000, 12,000 years ago. We had caribou in Connecticut as well. Very different situation. It's interesting to see without getting into linguistics too much, but the farther north, caribou is in the Algonquin language, Atuk or Aduk. And in Connecticut and Rhode Island, the Algonquin people, Narragansett people, and so forth, it was Atuk. So caribou and deer, they just kind of inherited the name. The caribou moved farther north, and the deer came in, but the same name. This was quite a few years ago. This one here, this is an older fawn. I find that I prefer not to try to approach wildlife. I don't want to invade their space. So again, it's from a distance. I try to observe their behavior, their body language, If they're acting agitated, nervous, stomping, snorting, all that kind of stuff, the white hair on their butts flare out, I'll turn around and go somewhere else. But if they're okay, I will generally go parallel to them. I generally don't approach directly. They don't. I mean, if you wonder how to behave like the deer do. When a deer come out of the woods and they see me there, and they don't walk directly to me, generally, except the fawns do, they don't care. But the adults will often walk around, and sometimes they'll come. Bucks especially will circle all the way around. I was trying to see if did some research as far as Native American scent lures, and interestingly, New England aster was used by Native peoples they burn it in a pipe, and the smoke, they claim, smells like the interdigital glands on a deer. It doesn't to me, and it tastes terrible. I don't recommend it. It's the nastiest tasting thing to smoke, but it works. At least in my limited number of experiments, sit there and smoke the pipe and watch the smoke. Oh, and in many cases when I've done that, a deer has emerged and followed that smoke trail. Well, I don't think it's really all that practical for me anyway, is because once they see where it's originating, they're gone. So what's the point of that? But it does. I had one buck one time same thing. The smoke was going off to my left. There was a buck came around, picked up on the smoke, started coming up, saw me, and he looped around, all the way around, and he came in the same line. I can't figure out how he calculated that, but it was the same line. The smoke was going this way, and he came around right on the same line going off. I thought that was pretty cool. There's so many things that I will never understand. This was another deer. Part of that fawn mortality study. That is a brand spanking new fawn. And before we could go in to collar the fawn and weigh the fawn and do all that, had to wait for it to be born. So we're sitting there watching the fawn being born. And we had to wait we want to make sure the mom has a chance to clean the fawn off. That's part of the imprinting process of her getting to know her fawn and the fawn getting to know mom by the scent and the licking and that whole thing. So it's important. We want to give about an hour to let her take care of her business, and then it should be all right. But if we go right in before the fawn has had a chance to imprint, or her on the fawn, then there's a risk of abandonment. So that's very important at that point. But that was kind of cool to watch the fawn being born. And she was about 15 yards away. She was pretty comfortable with humans being around. So, well, only so far. When she stood up, that's when I backed off with her. It's a dance, basically, working with, in this case, with deer. It's a dance of space. The family that I'm working with, the closest that they will generally approach me is 5 yards. And if I'm sitting on the ground, they probably walk right up to me. I couldn't catch them if I tried. But the closest is like 5 yards. 10 to 15 yards, a lot of deer feel okay with that. 25 yards, most deer, I can be within 25 yards of most deer. It's a lot of variables that determine that. About 25 yards. There have been several studies on flight distance, and that seems to be 25 yards seems to be the cutoff point where somebody's walking through the woods. Say they have a dog with them, especially. The deer out 25 yards will be gone. The person walking the dog may never know, because especially in New England, we've got so many trees and you never see. How are we doing on time here? This photo I just threw in because it was kind of a lucky shot. Come up the hill. I had my camera. He was standing there. Took a photo, and he's gone. So that worked out pretty good. This boy was not too happy with me. I was sitting down at one of my sit spots, and I'm right next to a fresh scrape. And so he comes diddy bopping down the trail, going to the scrape, and then all of a sudden he looks up and he was gone. But he was coming to the scrape. They do, like I say, we think of wildlife as always being totally alert all the time. They're present, but they may not be paying a whole lot of attention, especially if you're there at an odd hour, like very, very early in the morning, where nobody except me and nobody in their right mind goes out. If I'm out there before the sun comes up. So a lot of deer are a lot more comfortable, it seems like, at that time of day, as opposed to after, like if people come through walking their dogs and all that kind of stuff later on in the day, where there's more human activity, they might not be so much. And then after dark at night, a lot of times you can actually walk up to a deer at night without alerting them until the last minute. But if it's real dark and they snort when you're right next to them, that scares the daylights out of you. That's another random buck out there. He's still in velvet in this situation. I think he's a 6-pointer, I think. This is another one. This is a 6-pointer. He walked over. For whatever reason, I haven't done it. I hadn't done it prior to that. I had a harmonica in my pocket. So I walked into the woods, and I sat down next to a big pine tree, and I looked down probably 30 yards, and he was laying down behind a fallen tree. All I could see with his head, his antlers. So whatever prompted me, I pulled out my harmonica and started playing Amazing Grace. He got up, and he walked right over and parked himself right there. And I could play the harmonica and take photos at the same time. I'm good like that. But I hadn't seen that buck prior to that point in time, nor after that I was aware of. But he was really fascinated by the music. You hear people working with cetaceans, whales, and so forth with music, and other animals. Every once in a while, you see something on YouTube where people are playing violins or whatever it happens to be, and the animals are fascinated by it. It seems to be a common thing. We don't do that. We don't go out in the woods and start playing music for wildlife, but it's something to think about as far as where their minds are at. Things, because playing music, the musician is basically in that same mindset, a very still presence. Because you can't be thinking about a whole lot of stuff when you're playing an instrument. You're just very present. So I think the combination of the musician's presence and stillness on top of the music. I don't know, I haven't tried heavy metal, but I think there are certain types of music that might be more interesting to them. As a result of that, I said, there's got to be something a little bit less harsh than a harmonica. That's kind of brassy kind of sound. So I thought about, okay, Native American flute would be nice. And a friend of mine happened to make those. And I bought one, key of G. I had him play them, and I said, okay, that's the right one. I can feel it right here. So it's key of G. And so I learned to play one song, and that's the extent of my repertoire. So I learned to play one song. And so I was out in the woods one morning. I walked up the hill. It was a beautiful beautiful summer day, foggy, very foggy. And I walk up on top of this hill, and there were 4 bucks standing in the mist. Still in fairly good size. I don't recall, probably 6 to 8. I don't know that it was a 10-pointer, but I think 6 and 8 pointers, good sized bucks, standing there in the mist. So I bowed, turned around, and left. I came back at noontime and went on the other side of the hill with the flute. And I sat down and started playing slowly, I think 4 or 5 repetitions, just curious to see what the effect would be. I look out in front of me, and all 4 bucks in a line came up and spread out right in front of me. And I'm like, so I knew I was going to blow it. I was going to play another note. I moved one finger, gone, except for 1 buck stopped and turned around, kind of, what the heck was that? But it was really interesting to see that happen. It does have an effect. That's happened with coyotes and turkeys and other animals too. Same thing. I had sitting up on a little ridge playing the flute. I see a coyote off at a distance, and he comes trotting closer. He comes up right next to me on the ridge, looks at me, and bolts, takes off. But so either he was fascinated by the music, or he thought something was dying. So, but it's interesting. It's something to me. It's something to think about. I don't do it. I don't do that on a regular basis because I get used to it, and so it's just that same old sound. But it's something unique. They're very curious, and there's something very soothing apparently, and it looks like very mesmerizing to them. Again, for those 4 bucks to walk up and stand next to me, and I'm sitting right there in plain sight. There's something about the music that kind of drops some of the rules of the game. There's another buck. He lost an antler when it was still in velvet, and he would have been an 8-pointer. It's hard to see in here, but what I liked about the image is that when it was cold enough when he's breathing, you see his breath in and out, and that's kind of a powerful experience in a situation like that. As you're sitting there, they're breathing with the breath coming out. You're sitting here, you're breathing with your breath coming out. And it's such a strong, for me, the experience is such a strong connection. We're here and we're doing the same thing. He's got an enlarged neck from taking steroids. As well, testosterone is in this case, but that's the same mom that has fawn that I had the picture of this year earlier and the previous year. That was just kind of a cool shot, I thought. They didn't know me. They left. You can see her tail, how it's flared, like that. she wasn't too happy about my presence. I mean, working with how to be in the woods, like, based on John Young or Tom Brown. The important thing seems to be present and to be aware, because it seems to work out that with expanded awareness, the zone of disturbance shrinks. So if you're just bombing on through the woods, kind of oblivious to everything, your zone of disturbance is way the heck out there. You don't see anything. But you slow down and you watch the birds and see what the bird's doing. And you stop and pay respect to their presence and walk around them, perhaps. If they do a hook, then they're probably okay. They probably know you. And that's the nice thing about going to the same place every day on the same trails, that the animals that are living in certain areas get to know you. And if somebody sounds an alarm, there's always a question like, why? I mean, you should know me by now. But now, I've been here every single day. Like I said before, bird language is so extremely important to pay attention to. If people ask me, how do I get to see animals? Pay attention to birds. Forget about the deer. Forget about the other ones. Pay attention to birds. And if you can move in a respectful way through birdland, you'll get to know, like, there's an area, come through the woods in certain species in certain areas on the trail. I come around and there's a gas line, open gas line. Then I get a whole bunch of different species on that gas line, kind of a grassy area. And then I really get to see how the birds are responding to my presence out there. This was a gift again. Her and her yearling doe just came over and sat down, laid down, and there. Yeah, the yearling doe is paying attention to me, but Mom could care less. So that's a good sign. That means that, okay, doing something right. These are 4 deer that didn't know me. That one in the middle is obviously an alien. But they're very, very alert. Their ears are forward. Their eyes are forward. Their heads are up. So they're very, and it looks like the doe that's in front, it looks like the hair on her butt's flared a little bit. When they get nervous, instead of feeling chills on their spine, they feel it in their butt. That's the same mom as this year, but that was a couple of years ago, actually. Okay, this is a good example of what you may not see. This doe was one of the grandparents of this year's doe, and she was up on a hill, and I was on the trail, and all of a sudden he turns her head around. You see her eyes and her ears are all going the same direction, and her the hair on her tail and butt are flared way out. So that was body language that told me that something is causing her anxiety. In the area that I was at, it's kind of a given that it's somebody walking a dog. So she displayed this posture, and then she took off, and then 2 minutes later, that seemed to be kind of roughly the guideline. 2 minutes later, then a dog walker came out, walked through, and he never knew that she was there. But that was intentional. They're very, very alert. I don't know how far away he was. They say the flight distance can be anywhere between 25 to 50 yards. He was, when she first picked up on their presence, probably more than that. But anyway, she was very alert. Their senses this girl, this is part of the same lineage. She had a very distinctive blaze on her nose, so it's easy to tell her from others. For me to be able to distinguish one deer from the other, usually I look at the maybe distinguishing marks, maybe their bib, maybe something like her on her nose. But usually what I look at is associations. Who are they associated with, and how are they behaving regarding my presence? So the doe and her new fawn and her yearling this year, they're often together, and they're very comfortable with my presence. At least they seem to be, anyway. So I can say, okay, I know who you are, and they're in the same general area. This time of year, things got to get thrown out the window because the bucks are kind of stirring things up, starting to stir things up. One time I went down and sat down in the woods when the sun was going down. I wanted to see if I could see her with the other deer. There was a place in a swamp that they would often bed down during the day, and then when the sun, almost like clockwork, as soon as the sun dipped below the trees, the deer would come out. So I'm sitting there waiting to see if she's with the other deer, and there were about 6 or 7 deer that came out quite a bit farther east of me, and they came out, and I didn't see anyone that suggested that she might be there. So it was getting dark. I got up. I started walking out of the woods, and I stopped. She was right there. She was following me out of the woods, and I don't understand what's up with that. This is the one laying down is the same doe. This is where I believe that there was coyotes that prompted them to run, and this is right across from me. They came and lay down. That's her again. You see the blaze on her nose. That's it, huh? Thank you. So, anybody have questions regarding what I was presenting? Yes, ma'am.
I think at the beginning you had said the deer that you've been watching have like a quarter of a square mile area. Is that a normal area for a family of deer? They always have a larger area, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables. The area is actually pretty well developed, suburban development, commercial development, all that kind of stuff. So the effect seems to be that their ranges start shrinking, and they've been able to manage all right. There's plenty of food out there. It's like being born in a salad bar. I've had people ask me, so what did deer like to eat? Well, I said the better question would, what did they not like to eat? That's a very short list because they will eat most anything. I was talking to Bob the other day. They can eat things that are normally toxic, like mountain laurel leaves, yew. What else? They eat skunk cabbage. Like like Jim was saying earlier, they'll eat skunk cabbage. That is definitely an acquired taste. It has the calcium oxalate crystals that embed into the tongue and burn like the dickens. But somehow that's neutralized for them. They can tolerate plants that are normally toxic. They can tolerate a certain amount of that. Their saliva has enzymes that will deactivate some of the secondary compounds in some of these plants up to a certain point. And then they will also geophagia, which is eating dirt. Clay, if they eat clay, that helps to neutralize some of the toxins as well. So they will generally, they've got a lot of food. There's no need to feed the deer during the winter. There's plenty of food out there. And this year is a pretty abundant acorn crop. And to save energy on certain days, they don't like warm days, and 50 degrees is warm this time of year. They seem to like 45 and lower. And so they will often just park it. And with a high mass crop like we have this year, they don't have to go very far. Hunters complain because the deer aren't moving. Well, they don't have to, because they can bed down and get up, munch on acorns, and go bed back down again. So their home range doesn't have to be all that big, as long as it's a reasonable food source. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you see, so with bird language, we can nuance, like whether it's a ground predator or aerial predator, or even sometimes type and things like that. With deer, do you see any nuance in the stomping, the hopping, the tail down and spread out up? Like, do you know of any nuance of type of predator?
I don't. My initial impression is that it's either on or off.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if it's a real or perceived threat,
Right.
then they will respond and often run. And everything's about conservation of energy. If you're walking through the woods and you spook a deer and he goes blasting off into the woods, just wait. He might be waiting for you up the trail. They don't like to. Fawns are funny. They learn so much behavior from their mother. So they initially, for about the first 2 months, they won't run unless their mom triggers them to. I was out one time and 2 fawns come running over, kind of oblivious to me being there. I'm sitting next to a boulder, and Mom comes out, and she sees me and she starts snorting and stomping. Well, the fawns repeated that behavior, but they were looking the wrong way. It's like, oh, okay. And so it takes a while for it to kick in that, okay, that behavior is triggered by a specific perceived threat. So I don't know. What I've been focusing on is how an alarm call might affect the deer. They do. I've seen them in most cases. If there's a bird alarming, I've seen them attend to it. But then what determines whether or not they feel it's an actual threat, I don't know. I don't know. What do they say? Like with chickadees, the more number of DDDs, the more agitated they are. I don't know if that's a factor. I don't know. That's another mystery out there. Yes?
You had mentioned New England aster being used to bring.
I might need to have you. Oh, can I? Thank you. Thank you.
You had mentioned New England aster being used to bring in the deer because it have a similar scent as what kind of glands?
Oh, interdigital. They have, all deer have, between their two main hooves, they have, if you're a hunter or if you find a roadkill and you don't mind investigating a roadkill out in public view,
You can see it.
huh?
Just hold it.
Oh, okay. In between the two hooves is a little space where the individual gland, it's kind of a waxy, kind of almost, to me it smells like earwax in between. And deer, I've watched mothers find their fawns by following the interdigital trail. That's what I'm assuming, because the reason I say that is because every time they step hard, it'll leave a scent. And it's individual. Each scent is specific to an individual. And the reason I can be confident about the fact that the mother will find her fawn that way is because I've seen fawns have laid down, the mother's off doing whatever she's doing, and she comes back into the area, and the fawn may have gotten up and left. She'll go to the place where the fawn was last resting. And then they put their nose down and beeline right to the fawn. So I think that's a common, certainly an advantage to an interdigital gland to be able to find your little ones, especially if something spooks them. And usually it's not an issue. It's the fawns up until when they're, let's see, I'm trying to think what the cutoff, the studies seem to be at up until about 7 months, from 2 months to 7 months. When you spook a fawn, they will run like a bat out of hell and keep on going. Whereas an adult will run, stop, and double check to see what's going on behind them. It takes a fawn almost a full year before they get the hang of conserving energy. And the adults have it down, but the fawns are slow learners.